with a lot of these big companies, you're just having to look out constantly for the different ways that they are trying to legally scam you out of your hard-earned money. This is going to be a bit of a different video to ones that I've made previously, but I think it's quite important that I discuss this actually, because, and I don't know about you, but I've noticed over the last probably 5-10 years that there are some companies that just seem to be getting way too big for their boots, and they seem to be getting away with it relatively unchecked. Now, my name is Dan, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and one of the things that I'm really interested in is optimizing things, whether that's systems or processes or products. One of the things that I find quite rewarding is optimizing for customer satisfaction or usability of something, and just making a product generally better. Now, one area that you can pretty much always optimize for is profit, and I don't find that particularly rewarding usually, because it comes at some sort of cost to the consumer, whether that's reduced customer satisfaction, reduced features, increased frustration. But I've noticed, certainly recently, that a lot of these big, mainly tech companies, are often optimizing for profit. They're trying to increase their profit whilst directly reducing the customer satisfaction or the usability of a product. And I think that's a little bit sad actually. But in some cases, and this makes me really quite angry and annoyed, is it just feels like, and again, feel free to comment if you're the same, it just feels like at every turn with a lot of these big companies, you're just having to look out constantly for the different ways that they are trying to legally scam you out of your hard-earned money. And it's disappointing, and it's frustrating and annoying and tiring, but I want this video to serve as a bit of a seed for discussion about what we can do to, as consumers, to actually stop this from happening, and really to put these companies back in their place, because they wouldn't be anything without the consumer and the investors. One of the things that I want to avoid with this video is it becoming a rant, so I'm going to try and avoid that by very briefly going over some situations that I've certainly noticed over the last couple of years, especially ones that have been getting worse. And yeah, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below, and just see if they match my own, or if I'm just being a Karen of sorts. So the video streaming platform that you're currently watching this on, I have really noticed over the past few months that the adverts have just been getting ridiculous, to the point where the platform is almost unusable. Because I oftentimes watch long form videos about people just talking about random topics, or I might be watching a video about bushcraft, which is generally quite relaxing, and I'll put these on before bed and I'll probably fall asleep to them, and they just help to relax me. I was just noticing these really long unskippable adverts every 4 or 5 minutes on a video. Now, I'm not monetized, I haven't monetized this channel yet, so I can't really comment, and I do understand that, you know, people make videos, they should be paid for doing so, but the platform currently has just got ridiculous to the point where it actually ruins some of these people's videos. Weirdly enough, when I went to Spain for a cheap holiday in December, I noticed that their adverts weren't anywhere near as bad as the adverts that we've been receiving in the UK. And I'm not sure particularly why that is, but clearly they do have control over the adverts that they put on and the quantity of the adverts. But even ridiculous things like a 50-second long video and having like a 30-second long advert beforehand, like, I'm never going to watch that. And it's not just this platform either, there's other platforms as well that I take issue with. Mainly one of a large online retailer that also, as part of the subscription package for that, has a video streaming platform. Now, I don't really watch it that much, you know, me and my girlfriend probably watch 2 or 3 hours a week. But one thing that I noticed back in, I think April time, maybe April, May, June, back in the summer, they started putting adverts on the videos, and they started out as like 15-second long adverts, and I said to my girlfriend at the time, just you wait. They're not going to be 15 seconds for very long. And lo and behold, month after month, we notice that the adverts have been getting longer and longer, to the point now where they're like a minute and a half long, and the frequency of them has also increased as well. I think the thing that really aggravated me was the fact that I paid for a year's worth of this subscription before the adverts had come in and before there was any mention of adverts. So I've effectively paid for a product that they haven't actually delivered. They've actually reduced the effectiveness of the product. They've reduced my consumer satisfaction. They've changed the goalposts after I've paid, which I think is a bit scummy. And having looked into it a little bit further, I think there might even be grounds for a class action lawsuit. I heard some mention of that over in the US, so we'll have to see about that. The other thing as well is a popular music streaming platform. Now, I pay for the premium version of that because I often will listen to podcasts and stuff as I'm falling asleep. Now again, something that's kind of annoyed me a little bit with this streaming platform is the fact that I'm paying for a premium service, which means that I don't get adverts. But I've noticed on podcasts that doesn't seem to apply. I'm not talking about the podcast creators doing a sponsorship either, actually within the podcast. I'm talking about actual adverts that are at different volumes to the rest of the podcast that have been inserted in. Now, you can skip them, but if you're using podcasts to relax or fall asleep, that's kind of the last thing that you want to do. It wakes you up. Again, I don't know who places those, whether it's up to the creator to do that or not, but you know, there's a popular Formula One podcast that I used to listen to, and these adverts that they were putting in were like every 4 or 5 minutes, and it's got to the point now I don't listen to them anymore. It's a shame. I really enjoy their podcast, but the adverts that they put in have just made it unwatchable for the purpose that I use it to listen to. So yeah, I mean, companies have been getting pretty greedy with their adverts, I'd say, recently. And you know, you might say, well, it's free to watch an advert, but you know, your time is money. In a way, I understand. I think that adverts should be part of these platforms that you use for free. But I think when they start applying them to platforms that you pay for, it's a bit cheeky. And do you know what? I bet nobody really complains about it, so they just get away with it. They get more and more money. And with adverts, it's not just you, the person watching them, that gets shafted a lot of the time. It's also the people who are paying for adverts. I recently paid a fairly decent sum of money to a large social media company to run some adverts to generate some interest for a new business that I am coming up with, which helps people who've got product ideas and don't know how to make them into a prototype. I'm helping people with my mechanical engineering knowledge to do that. And I ran some adverts on social media and had a couple of hundred people visit my website. But as it turns out, the majority of those clicks that were generated on the website were actually a scam. They weren't real, they were bots. And I did some further research into this and found that it's a common issue that these social media websites are charging people to run their adverts when they know that in some cases 90% of the views and clicks that you're getting are actually bots. They're not real and they know about it, but they refuse to do anything about it. It's not just you, the person watching the adverts, it's also the person paying for them. And the person in the middle is making a nice healthy profit out of them, I'm sure. Going back to the big online retailer, again, another thing, I've just noticed that customer service standards have just dropped like beyond low, to the point where it's just ridiculous now. It's like speaking to a robot every time that you have a query or question or complaint. And oftentimes you're chatting to some sort of AI bot until you persist and persist and persist and get through and talk to somebody. And that's one thing I've noticed with, again, that big online retailer that I paid a yearly amount to have free delivery for. The delivery standards have dropped terribly low, and you know, I get it, it is a difficult job delivering those parcels, you know, but again, that's on the company. The amount of times recently I've heard a knock at the door, I've gone to collect my parcel and the person's already gone. They didn't even know if I was in or not. They've just left the parcel. The other industry which I take a particular issue with, and it really does wind me up and annoy me, is a lot of these telecoms and broadband and mobile phone contract companies, insurance companies, they've all really been taking the mickey over the past few years. I don't actually know if it is the past few years, to be fair. I think they've always took the mickey, but it's now got to a point where they are just getting away with murder. So my mobile phone contract started at £30, but wasn't even really presented to me that the contract would be increasing by RPI, so the rate of inflation, plus a percentage. I think in this case it was about 4%. So by the end of my 2-year deal, I ended at just under £40 a month, which completely had changed the equation, and it wasn't very clearly laid out to me that that would be the case. And yeah, okay, it was in the contract. It was, I agree, I didn't read the contract. That was my fault, that was my problem. But it wasn't very clearly laid out to me, especially on the company I used to actually get the phone on. It said a total cost for the contract, but there was no asterisk next to it saying that this is subject to increase by inflation plus a percentage that they're going to make profit on. So I came to the end of my contract at £40 a month, and I just wanted a SIM-only deal. I thought, you know what, I'm not going to get a new phone. The contract prices are ridiculous at the moment. The phone's absolutely fine. And I said that I usually want, 5 gigabytes a month. They provided a deal for me, which was 50 gigabytes a month, so 10 times more than I would normally use, data-wise, for £45 a month for a SIM-only deal. I thought, well, that's just not right, is it? So I went on some comparison websites and found the exact same deal, 50 gigabytes a month. It was identical for £12 a month. How possibly are they able to offer the same product for such different prices? That is a scam in my mind, because people like my grandparents, would fall for that. They just go, okay, well that's the cost of it. They might not look at a comparison website, and so these companies are just getting away with charging through the roof, making huge profits on something that the customer probably doesn't even need. Again, I didn't need that much data, but yet that's what they suggested to me. Anyway, I clicked the comparison website, and all of a sudden the £45 disappeared and the £12 appeared. So and it was on the same system, so they know that this is the case. It's just a scam, and a lot of these companies are just getting away with it. It's getting a bit outrageous now. And it's not just online tech companies, they're all at it. The big supermarkets. What's going on with the membership prices that some of these big supermarkets offer? What's going on with that? The membership price is just the normal price that they want to sell it to you for. So if you forget your membership card or whatever, you've got to pay over the odds. How is that possibly allowed? Again, it's just shoddy, it's crap. And if you're not careful and you don't check the dates, you'll come home and realise that you bought something which has yesterday's sell-by date and it's off. We bought a mango last week that was mouldy, but it was all packaged so you couldn't tell that. But they know that it's very unlikely that most people are going to go back and actually complain about it, so they just get away with it. In some cases, with a certain German car dealership recently with me, again, actually committing fraud, blaming me for damage on a car that I had to return because it blew up, and then trying to blame me for the problem, even though the issue was there. I have evidence that the issue was present before they sold it to me. Actually committing fraud. But again, companies will get away with it unless you become bullshit. So what should we do about all this then? Because it's all well and good me complaining about these companies, and I'm sure that you probably feel the same way. But what are we going to do about it? Because a lot of them are big and powerful, and they've got a lot of consumers, and a lot of consumers that will just put up with shoddy service, scams, and in some cases outright fraud. So really, in my mind, there's only 4 things really that you can do. You can either do what most people do, which is just to accept it and hope it gets better, hope that someone else complains about it. It will never get better, it will only get worse, I'm telling you that now. 2, you can either complain internally, you can complain to the company. Again, I've found that recently just completely futile. Companies just aren't interested. They know their service is crap, they know it's shoddy, and they don't do anything about it. They don't care. They've got zero interest. They really genuinely don't care. Number 3 is that you can played publicly and hope that you get enough traction behind you to actually make a difference and make these companies think twice. So if these companies are just chasing pure profit, then that's all they'll listen to. And number 4 for me, and I think this is actually a pretty good one, is just to stop using the service and find an alternative that works for you. Now in some cases, people don't have the luxury of doing that, but I think if you can afford to do it, then do it. Don't let these companies carry on getting away with the crap that they do. I kind of like the consequence of this point, because if you can find local businesses or businesses that just care about customer service, about quality, about looking after the customer over profit, then I think actually if you can go away and support those sorts of businesses, then that's always good. One of the projects that I've been doing is to do up a dining room table before we move house, and I required some different concoctions in order to complete the project. So I went to one of these big hardware shops, and the person in the shop just didn't really understand what I needed. They offered me the wrong product and it didn't work. So I decided to go into a local hardware shop where the person actually was the owner of the shop who I was speaking to, and they listened to what I needed. They gave me the right product, and actually, as it turned out, I saw the same product that I was offered at the big shop, which I think I paid £26 for in the big shop. In this little local hardware shop, it was £18. So it's not always more expensive. The other thing is that if I'd have wanted to return that £26 concoction that didn't work, that I was misinformed about, they wouldn't allow me to return it because it was open. They'd make me prove that the person told me the wrong info. I've got no doubts in my mind that that small business would have either taken a refund or exchanged it for the right product. Personally, I've started and run a couple of really small businesses, and one thing that I personally know is that I would much rather go to sleep at night with less money in my pocket, but knowing that I've actually done a good job, that I've actually offered a service to someone, which is what they expected, that I've delighted the customer, that I've made them feel like they're concerned, if they did have a complaint, that their concerns are valid and that I wanted to actually address them and make the service better where possible, of course. Anyway, I hope that video has kind of prompted some thoughts in your mind about maybe some areas that you have been subjected to poor customer service, scams, just shoddy practice by big companies, and maybe made you start to think about ways that you might be able to impact that yourself, or maybe even drive wider action online to prevent these companies from getting away with stuff. Of course, it is very difficult because there are some companies that have a monopoly, but ultimately, if you can find ways as an individual consumer, and we can find ways as a collective, a group of consumers, to make positive change and support companies that actually care about us, people that are funding their profits, then I hope this video does that. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching. I hope I've not rambled on too long. If you are interested in things like optimisation, like business, then please like the video, subscribe and comment your experience as well. Thank you very much.